Welcome to Catch You Outdoors. I'm your host, Captain Rob Modis. Contact email catchyoutdoors@gmail.com. My website is catchyoutdoors.com. And my Facebook page is Catch You Outdoors. Catch You Outdoors presented by the Waypoint Podcast Network at waypointtv.com. Got a couple books available. Amazon, Kindle, Bridge to Paradise, book of short stories. Also, What I Know About Fishing Southwest Florida. If you live on that coast or you're planning to visit Sanibel and Fort Myers Beach, going to do a little fishing, you might want to check it out. Book 3's in the works. It has a working title, Take a Kid Fishing, a guide for introducing youngsters to the world of angling. Yep, looking forward to getting that one out, finished up, and on Amazon, and on bookshelves by late summer. This week's topic, episode 43, titled Everglades City and Chokoloskee. The end of the road, basically, on the west coast of Florida. We'll get to that in just a minute. It's been an insane week for your host. Traveling, I did west coast, I did south, I did north to Gainesville, and then back, and I'm on my way back up for ICAST. Which I'll be arriving up there on Tuesday for the Wednesday, Thursday time frame. I can't wait. There'll be more on the podcast about ICAST. Don't worry. Probably in the next week. Probably the following week after this podcast. Also, big news. My wife Janelle and I are moving. We're going to go to the Florida Keys. Yeah, it's been a wish on the wish list and a dream of ours for quite some time. We met in Key West 27 years ago. We're on our 25th wedding anniversary coming up in October. And a job opportunity for Janelle came up that she just could not pass up. So she grabbed it, and we will be moving down to Key West. I think she has to start by September 1. So I'm very much looking forward to this. Haven't locked down the location for where we're going to live. Her job is asking her to be somewhere between Key Largo and Marathon. So we're starting with Key Largo, to be perfectly honest with you. We're going to check that out more thoroughly, and I'll have more to talk about probably in the future, but it's a big deal to us, and we're really looking forward to becoming Key people, the fabulous Florida Keys. So anyway, this episode is all about Everglades City and Chokoloskee on the West Coast. I was a fishing guide over there for close to 18 years. Some folks say 20. I don't think it was that long. I think it was closer to 16 to 18 years. But anyway, it was a long time. I spent a lot of time on the water, and I spent quite a bit of time fishing in Everglades National Park. Let's get it right. But anyway, it's through friends and clients and my brother and a great many of us would venture down there. But for me personally, fishing in that area out of Everglades City, Chokoloskee was always a vacation for me, quite honestly. I didn't do charters there. My charters were all up in the Pine Island Sound area, around Sanibel, Captiva, south in the Estero Bay, the Gulf of Mexico, and down toward Naples. That's pretty much what I did. So my trips down south for fishing were, vacation. If you can actually be a fishing guide and take a vacation and go fishing, I suppose you can. People always ask me, I'm retired, and I say, when you retire, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I don't know. They're like, you're going to go play golf? No, I'm not going to play golf. I'm going to go fishing. So anyway, when you get down to Everglades City, we'll start with that because of the two on the position on the West Coast. The first thing you run into, if you run out of basically, you travel east on 41 out of Naples. So US 41, which sounds like a north-south road, which it mostly is until you go across the Everglades. Then it becomes more of an east-west highway. You head out of Naples, you go over till you get to Highway 29, and you head south, due south on 29. 29 will pretty much dump you right smack dab into the middle. No, not in the middle, but on the northern edge of Everglades City. So you're there. One of the places that I like to fish quite a bit happened to be located right in that area, right when you got to the bridge, which runs over the Barren River. There's a great place to stop and fish, especially if you're a kayaker. There's a little launch there to put you into the Barren River. So, but These two towns, I mean, they're located as far south as you can drive on the west coast of Florida, and that's what always made them so. The end of the road kind of thing. That's what made it so interesting. It's kind of like it's not Key West by any stretch of the imagination, but in my mind, it's like Key West in that you drive to the end of the road to get there, and you ain't going no farther unless you got a boat, and that's pretty much what it's all about. They both lie at the very beginning of the Everglades National Park, on the West Coast entrance rather. And based on my observations, I don't think a whole lot of folks even know that the Everglades stretches out that far and up that far. The Everglades National Park is typically associated with running down through Miami. And you go into the park entrance near Homestead, and that's how you get to the park. I'll talk more about that in a little bit, how you get down into Flamingo and all. But the reality is that the park runs across the entire bottom of the state of Florida, just about, almost wall to wall. And the westernmost entrance is in Everglades City. So it's actually a park entrance, and it has parking. It has a ramp launch for kayaks. It's got kayak rentals, and that puts you out into Chokoloskee Bay, and some of the most fabulous fishing going. We'll hang on to that. The first people to known to inhabit the area, were the Calusa Indians, ancient Florida tribe, 2,000 years ago and longer. The first modern-day settler was, I got to look at my notes. I know it's William Smith Allen, shortly after the Civil War. He died in 1889. Mr. George, you'll love this, Storter Jr. bought the land from the estate for $800. All of it. It just kind of blows me away. The town of Everglades City became, believe it or not, a county hub, if you will. In 1920, the town was a small fishing village. However, Baron Collier of New York, he was in advertising industry. He was a millionaire. He began buying land in what would later become Collier County. He eventually became the largest private landowner in Florida. When the construction of the Tamiami Trail, 41, that I was just talking about, the road that connected Tampa to Miami, they ran out of money. Baron Collier, he offered basically to finish the road through the Everglades. In return, he wanted this new quote county named after him, and that's where Collier County came from. Baron Collier. The Tamiami Trail was open. As it says in the press, I love the headline I read this morning rather, with great fanfare in 1928. Now you got to understand, they literally built a road across what then was the Everglades, from one side to the other to connect the West Coast to the East Coast through the bottom of the state instead of midway. And it was quite a feat. As it's turned out, the Everglades have been badly affected by this highway. And, it's one of those lessons learned. You move through time and you start to go, well, that didn't work out. But that was 1928 for crying out loud. We're almost 100 years later now. The blockage of the water moving through was a problem. They left like viaducts for some water to pass through, and they raised the highway, of course. But over time, the less water going south into the Everglades became a big problem. And then you had Okeechobee soaking some up for agriculture and on and on and on. So now they're working on 41, by the way. The Tamiami Trail on the Miami side is actually being raised so that water can pass under it. I've been over big chunks of it. It's just amazing how the work that they're doing on it is actually fantastic. It really is. Everglades City, which known in those days was just called Everglade, it served as the county seat of Collier County. And the county offices were later moved to Naples. That was in 1961. That was after Hurricane Donna. Hurricane Donna in 1960 just devastated the lower part of the southwest coast of Florida. I was a young boy in Clearwater, Florida, when that happened. It's one of my earliest memories. I remember going down to the Clearwater, I guess I'll call it the marina. That's where the charter boats were. And I remember my dad was down there, and my dad was an 8mm film buff. He loved to shoot movies in 8mm, and I have them. I have pictures of the hurricane flags flying in downtown or along the beach, rather, on Clearwater Beach. Pretty amazing. So in 1961, after it was moved to Naples, they changed the town's name to Everglades City. I think that was in 60, don't hold me to this, I believe it was 1965. The downtown area, if you want to call it that, is really very, very cool. I happen to be real partial to small town. And I'm partial to small town with the circle in the middle of it. Usually it either held the court, the county court, or it held the bank or whatever. And in this case, it holds the bank in Everglades City. And the bank building is really unique. Somehow it's managed to survive without, you would think at some point somebody would just get rid of it, but no. I guess it's been a mainstay for so long in Everglades City. And now I believe they're doing a lot of restoration work to it. The last time I was there and went inside, believe it or not, it was a B&B. Somebody bought the bank and turned it into a bed and breakfast. And what I remember most about that was the vault was used for the breakfast. You actually went inside the vault, and that's where they served breakfast. So, complete with a vault door. Please, Lord, don't shut it. But anyway, it was, I think in the minds of Floridians familiar with Everglades City, what now stands out the most, once you get past the historical parts of it, is the fact that it is the it's the stone crab capital of the world. It is one of the highest of the best fishing areas in the world, if you will. But I think their motto is stone crab capital of the world, so we'll hold it right there. But if you want it fresh, let me back up. Some of you listening may not even know what a stone crab is. A stone crab is the claws only. It's weird. it's very weird. While there are other crabs out there where the legs and claws are eaten, this is one where the crab itself is tossed back into the water after harvesting a claw or two to grow more. So it's a renewable resource. Very unusual. In the case of fishing, crabbing, whatever, oystering, whatever, you take it off the bottom, you open it, eat it, kill it, whatever, you're done with it. That's not the case with stone crabs. And stone crabs are highly protected now. Seasons run at a certain time. We'll get into that in just a second. But it's very, it's very interesting to me. So the stone crab, I think, is the best crab on the planet. Now, I was born in Williamsburg, Virginia. We moved to Florida when I was 5. But we made many trips back, and it was made known to me that blue crabs are awesome, and they are. I love soft-shell crabs. I love blue crab meat. I love blue crab crab cakes. I mean, you name it. But I like stone crab better than anything else. It is a very delicious, mild meat, and if you ever get the chance to try it, do it. But you should really do it in Everglades City. During season only. Got to stress this now. Stone crabs are not something you do frozen, okay? It's not something to keep and then you carry over to the next year. It's got to happen like right now for it to be right. So, season, October 15th to May 1st. And the best place to have them, obviously, is down in Everglades City. Now, there are other places throughout Florida that get fresh stone crabs. They ship them all the way over to Miami. They ship them up to Fort Myers. Matter of fact, Pincher's Crab Shack, one of my favorite places to eat in Fort Myers, has got nice fresh ones. But if you want the experience, the real, eating them on a dock, City Seafood, that's the one that always pops into mind. Just remember this, City Seafood in Everglades City. You go there, you park out front, you go out on the dock, the stone crab boats come in right there at the dock. They steam the crab claws there, ice them down, and sell them right out of the case by size. There's usually like a medium, large, and jumbo. They are not cheap. I'm not going to kid you. It's worth it. It's worth it. What I also love about City Seafood is it makes my mouth water talking about it. You have ice cold beer or sodas in a tub of ice that you can pull out of there when you get your crabs ordered. And then close by, there's a key lime pie. When you get finished, you can get yourself a nice piece of key lime pie. It's really, really hard to beat that. Now let's start back when I told you first drive it onto the island. You come to a little bridge, and that little bridge runs over the top of the Barren River. Barren River is It's really cool. I was recently introduced. I mean, I'd been there before. I used it for travel. I had never really fished it all that much. It's a difficult river to navigate. It has a lot of shallow spots in it. Local knowledge would be a really good idea if you're going to go to the part that would be directly to the east. So as you're traveling into Everglades City, that's going to be on the left-hand side of the bridge. And back in there, a couple of friends of mine, Mike and Dave, took me several times kayak fishing back in there. And we launched kayaks near the bridge and then pedaled. In our case, we have the Hobie kayaks. We pedaled over and headed into the river itself, heading easterly into the river, away from the open water. So technically upstream. And the fishing is fantastic in there. It really is a lot of fun. You don't have to go very far to start fishing. As a matter of fact, almost immediately when you get in the water, there are beautiful mangrove edges and mangrove overhangs. There's all kinds of cuts and, little bays and cutaways and stuff in there. The guys that I fished with had kind of a route that they liked to pull, and we would just do this big circular route. You go up one side and then make a big circle around some islands and come back down. Beautiful snook, redfish, sea trout in the open water, jacks, some rather large sharks, things like that. It was just a really, really fabulous place to fish. Quiet, and very seldom did we ever see another boat. That was something that I really, really liked about it. There wasn't much reason for a boat to be up there, to tell you the truth, unless they're, traveling to another location in the river. But all intents and purposes, this was kind of kayak heaven for us. And we caught a lot of fish in there. I remember one monster jack I got that turned me all around in circles in that kayak, and I enjoyed that a lot. At the southern end of the town, as you go over the bridge, so as you go over the bridge, to your right would be the stone crab places I'm talking about, which are actually on the Barren River. As you go further south, you run into the entrance to the Everglades National Park. They call it the western entrance, or perhaps southwestern. I'm not going to, again, don't hold me to this. I do most of this from memory, believe it or not. I like doing it that way. I look up some stuff, but it's more fun to shoot from the hip. So Everglades National Park, I had been there many times too, but I'd never kayaked out of there until I met these same two guys. So you can tell Mike and Dave were instrumental in getting me into all kinds of trouble. No, not really. It was actually a lot of fun. In this case now, there's a whole different ballgame when you do this, because you're literally launching out of the park in the kayak launch on Chokoloskee Bay. The bay itself, I personally find not very fishy. You have to be around oyster bar cuts, mangrove edges, or something to catch fish. For some reason, the fish just don't seem to like the open bay. Now, it seems that they would, because it's open flats. It's not much deeper than 3-4 feet across this thing. In my world, when you fish like Pine Island Sound or Matlacha Pass, that's where you catch a lot of sea trout, a lot of ladyfish, stuff like that. But that doesn't really hold true when you're going across Chaco. I'm not sure why. But you move across, and obviously you're going to run into all kinds of islands and cuts and crannies and things way before you get to the Gulf of Mexico. And that's where we fished. I'm not going to give you any specific locations. I don't want to get in trouble with those two people. But let me tell you what, it was very fishy. The highlight in there, I mean, you can catch tarpon and all kinds of things in there, but the highlight for me was catching a bull shark that was almost the length of my kayak. My kayak is 12 feet, by the way. This thing hauled me out of a small creek, drove me across the bay. And it was and then I managed to, I put the force on him and turned him, and then I saw him go by the kayak, and I thought, oh no, this is not good. I probably shouldn't. I really don't want to get real close to this critter. Bull sharks are known for a really bad attitude. So for those of you that aren't familiar with bulls, they do not shy away. They're not a critter that runs. They're typically a critter that turns right around and will start, bumping your boat, in this case a kayak. And I didn't want any part of that. But it was very exciting, and it was great to see something so big. Honestly, I thought I was going after a big redfish. On the corner of the mangrove, I saw a little wave of brown, which was actually turned out to be part of the tail. And I thought, oh, wow, that is the biggest redfish tail I've ever seen in my life. And I cast to it. It hit it immediately. And then I realized I had a whole lot more than a redfish on. So very entertaining. But that's at the southern end. So at the southern end of Everglades City, before you head down the road toward Chaco, we'll get to that in a minute, You can put in their kayaks. They also have kayak rentals available there too. I think I may have mentioned that. Great stop off place and a great place to go fishing if you're a kayaker in the area. There are also quite a few charter opportunities in Everglades City. Be sure to check them out. And I'm not gonna. I've never fished with anybody there personally. I have fished with guys who have taken me there, and we've gone fishing. But in the local area, I haven't. But I've always recommend a local guide. I tell people if you're going to fish an area, check out the local dudes that live there. Gals, in this case, there are gals that fish now. Yes, and they're very good, by the way. But check it out and book a trip that way. A little further down the road, as I was mentioning, when you get past the park entrance, there's a road that just basically shoots you down to the end of the west coast by road. Not totally by the end, but by road. And that's Chokoloskee. Chokoloskee, Chokoloskee, the city of, sorta. It's very small. It's an island. I mean, there's not much to it, but it's a remarkable place. There are a couple places to stay. I mean, technically, I call it the end of the west coast of Florida. There's a couple little small. I haven't been down in a while, but last check there were a couple of resorts. They had to, after Hurricane Irma, remember, a lot of work had to be done to get Chaco and Everglades City back on the map. So if you see something on the map and you think, I'm going to go try out this little resort or this little motel, you need to check first and make sure everything's been rebuilt and redone. Most things have, but you never know. I mean, process is slow when you're on those little islands down there in what I like to call the middle of nowhere. You can... one of the nice things about Chokoloskee is the ability to launch boats to get really good access to the Everglades National Park. And there are a couple places that you can launch from there. Again, check and make sure everything's still kosher with that. It really is pretty remarkable. Chokoloskee is the last access to the Glades on this side. However, as I mentioned, this is not as far south as you go. As far south as you can go by road is Flamingo. And Flamingo is accessed entirely on the other side of the state. You would go down through, past Miami, take the turnpike south till it turns into US 1. And at that crossroads right there, you can get on a highway called the 9936. It's got a name, Ingraham Highway. You can get on Ingraham Highway, or Ingram? It might be Ingram. I can't remember how anyway, it's 9936. That road takes you all the way to the gate for the Park Service and then eventually into Flamingo. Now, that's as far as you can travel by road on mainland Florida, as far as I know. I mean, I'm sure there's trails and hiking places you could go on, but if you're taking your vehicle, that's where you go. And that's access to the Everglades National Park as well. But you got to go all the way across to the other side of Florida. So if you're visiting the west coast of Florida, your best access is in Chokoloskee and Everglades City for getting down into the Everglades by boat, typically by boat. Chaco, as most of the locals refer to it, is still pretty much a fishing village. There are a couple places to stay. A few charters run out of there. But there's access to some of the fishiest waters. I mean, that is its main attraction. For me, Chaco is like this. When you travel south, you have this opportunity to do a special kind of fishing in the Everglades that you really don't get anywhere else in Florida. Obviously, of course, you're not next to the national park. You're not next to the Everglades. But think of it this way. Number one, we never went by ourselves. If we went boating down into the Everglades National Park out of Chaco, we always went in pairs of boats or 3 boats. Get all the guys together. Okay, everybody, we're going to go to Chaco. Let's go fishing. Safety in numbers. The reason I say that, if you break down there, that's not good. You want a radio, really good radio. Cell phones don't always work. Matter of fact, they seldom work when you get way down into the park. So you want a really good radio or a sat phone. But we always went in numbers. And one of the most fascinating things for me was, as you travel down, you will see the typical fish, red snook tarpon. You will see a lot of jacks, ladyfish, things like that. You'll see dolphins swimming through there, lots of flippers. But as you go down and you start to move slightly east, slightly east away from the Gulf of Mexico, the water starts to get fresher and fresher because you're literally running into the Everglades. And that's not a salt body of water. Did I say that right? Saltwater body of water, right? So guess what? You'll catch snook because snook don't have a problem with swimming in fresh, but right after you catch the snook, you're liable to catch a largemouth bass or any one of cichlids that have been released over time, the invasive cichlids, Mayans, and things like that, tilapia, all kinds of strange stuff mixed in with snook, sometimes small tarpon. But it's just, I love that. I love the fact that you can wet a line in a place and you don't have any clue what might happen once you get to a certain borderline or delineation. A word of caution, and this was given to me by an officer with FWC several years ago. If you're going to fish that area, you really should take a combo fishing license with you. This is kind of weird. In the state of Florida, for those that don't know, we have two fishing licenses, so to speak. This is primarily for locals and for tourists. We have a saltwater and a freshwater license, and the delineation between the two is pretty much a line that's on a map that shows you when you're entering a freshwater area. Now, in the Everglades, that line is not real clear. So to be legal, if you wind up going into a freshwater area, you really should have a freshwater license with you. Now, there's some argument about that, and the officer told me this. He said, if you are snook fishing, if you're specifically targeting snook, snook will go to freshwater, but it's a saltwater fish. It's considered a saltwater fish. So there's a little bit of a gray area there. But, if you're going to spend time doing this, I'm not talking about a week's vacation. I'm talking about, you live in the area, you want to go really do something totally different and totally exciting over all the other fishing you've done in Florida, then I would recommend you get a combo license. And that'll keep you out of hot water. Something else you might want to do is make sure you beef up your gear. I like fly fishing. I'm a fly fishing freak. I love going fly fishing. And while I still use an 8-weight rod, if you're going to go in there and tarpon fish, you might want to beef it up a little. You'd be surprised what you get. There's some really large sawfish in there. One of the rarest fish of all in the state of Florida can be caught in this area. And if you don't know what that is, picture a nurse shark, if you know what that is, a shark with a great big huge saw blade on its nose. And they're making a nice comeback. That's something where an 8-weight fly or a light spin is going to have a real problem with. So you never know what's going to surprise you when you're fishing back in this area. So you might want to beef up your gear a bit. So I mentioned earlier, the access to the fishy waters is its main attraction. That's what Choco's all about. But perhaps you've heard this story. Is it really what Choco's all about? For those that are history buffs, and I am that. There's no doubt. I love science and history, my two favorite things. There's a store there called Smallwood's Store. It was owned by a gentleman named Ted Smallwood. It's at the end of the road, as I like to say, in Chokoloskee. There are ghosts. People said they're ghosts. I haven't seen them, but I'll take the word for some folks that have hung around there in the evening. You won't catch me there in the evening. Not because of ghosts, but because of mosquitoes and no-see-ums. There's this man, and his name was Edgar Watson. And Mr. Watson was a bit of a problem. By all accounts, he was a very, very bad man. So here's a little story. I'm going to loosely recount this with some of my notes and things and books that I've read. But Edgar Watson basically was, in most people's eyes, a killer. Everyone knew that he hid a gun underneath a black cloak that he wore, always with it. He had a horrible disposition, terrible temper. They say he shot Belle Starr, who was an outlaw herself. And after he shot her again on the ground to make sure she was dead. He couldn't stay in Oklahoma when that was back in 1889, 1890. He couldn't stay in Oklahoma after he did that, so he fled to, where does everybody go? Florida. Yeah, you got it. On his way down to the Chokoloskee area, as far as he could go, he killed a man in Arcadia. Supposedly, that was a self-defense case where he was brought in, but he was released. Then he made his way down to the 10,000 Islands. At that, you have to remember now, back in 1890, this is where the outlaws went. Anybody that had any kind of problem anywhere in the United States had found out that they could just crawl down to the southwest coast of Florida and basically just disappear, and that's pretty much what he did. When when Watson got down there, one of the first people he met was Ted Smallwood, who was the owner of the store. And at that time, the store was a trading post. Is really what there's a post office, of course, and a market, but it was really, like a grocery. But what it really was a trading post, and people came and went. The store is something you have to really see to believe. The fact that it's still there is amazing. It's painted like a barn red, that dark red like a barn. It's on stilts. It's not very big. And it's literally hangs out over the water. The edge of it hangs on water, and part of it's on land. And it was used to. It was a store. There was nothing else. Like 60 miles around, there was no place you could buy anything. So you kind of had to go to Smallwood's to get it. Smallwood knew Watson's reputation. He knew he was a bad man. He knew he had heard problems, but he paid his bills. He took care of business. And, later it was recounted that Watson made a trip to Key West and killed a guy in Key West. And then he came back, and there were two other men in the Chaco area that got in his way, and he killed both of them. And then it got really crazy. He would hire people to farm his land. I believe he was raising sugar, which was pretty lucrative in that area. Anytime you have a swamp with black mud, you can raise some really, really decent cane sugar. And so he was raising sugar. Instead of paying people, they would wind up missing. Not good. It was referred to, it still is, you'll still hear this every now and then, bad checks in that area were referred to as a Watson payday. So there you go. Anyway, the townspeople had really started to get upset about him. They suspected him, and there was nothing being done, especially after he started killing his own employees not to pay them. And so one day in 1910, at the store, a crowd confronted Watson. They basically accused him of his misdeeds, and not to. Let's say this, supposedly Watson drew first, and little did he know that all of these people were armed, and they all shot back and killed him. The record says he was shot 33 times. That's pretty much it. Local justice, if you were. So that's really and truly, to me, that is what Ted Smallwood's story is famous for. I've read many, many accounts, journals. There's some wonderful stuff out there. If you really want to read something interesting, there's a dramatization, I call it, of a gentleman named Peter Matheson, who's an author. And Peter Matheson wrote a book called Killing Mr. Watson. I looked it up for this podcast. It came out in 1990. It's available on Amazon. Do yourself a favor. If you really want to get a feel for how crazy Southwest Florida was back in the late 1800s to early 1900s, and what an outlaw place it really was. That book is beautifully written and really covers a lot of the things that make the area kind of interesting and kind of special. Oh, don't forget your fishing rod. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you taking the time to tune in. If you enjoyed the podcast, please tell a friend and leave a review. My podcasts are scheduled for each and every Tuesday. Catch You Outdoors is presented by the Waypoint Podcast Network and is available on Waypoint and by many of your favorite podcast providers. Facebook page is Catch You Outdoors, website waypointtv.com and catchyoutdoors.com. Until next time, get outdoors and enjoy.